everybody, to the Captain Spot. I'm your host, Justin Freeman, 6 foot 1 inches, 277 pounds of fantasy knowledge. And guys, you've been hanging in there all season long. It's time for the payoff. It is the Super Bowl. It's among us. It's tomorrow, recording here Saturday afternoon. Want to make sure you guys had the most up-to-date information regarding injuries, breaking news, analysis, heading in here to the final captain spot of the season. And thank you guys, honestly, from the bottom of my heart. It's been a long season. You're hanging in there. We're grinding these showdown slates. There's been a bunch of them. We're rocking and rolling. We are, I think, at episode 65 now this season. So thank you guys for hanging in there. Make sure you hit the like, rate, review, subscribe buttons. You know what to do. You guys have been there before. I really appreciate it once again. But without further ado, why don't we hop into this slate? It looks like it should be a fun one. We're talking Tampa, Kansas City. This game has 56-point total. The Bucs are dogs at home. Home game here for the Buccaneers by 3 points. So it looks like it should be pretty close. And overall, we're going to talk about different ways for us to get unique on this slate. Honestly, you guys don't need me breaking down situations. We know who these teams are. At this point in the season, we know what to expect from each of these teams. Obviously, Kansas City wants to be taken to the promised land by Patrick Mahomes against this really tough run defense from Tampa Bay. We know how good this run defense is. Number 1 in the league in rush attempts allowed. Don't allow any rush attempts. And number 1 in the league in yards per attempt allowed. So, the best rush defense by a mile is Tampa Bay defense. We've been, avoiding running backs and running options against them all year, and we're not super excited to play running backs against them here. Obviously, the two options for Kansas City that we'd be considering at running back are now down to Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Darrell Williams. To me, I still lean Darrell Williams, as I think most sharper people across the industry are doing. Based on what we've seen, Darrell Williams has outperformed Clyde Edwards-Helaire in every facet of the game during this postseason. Granted, it's only been 2 games here for the Chiefs, but really over the last month, Darrell Williams has looked like a good running back in this Chiefs offense. And I should note, I guess, that against this Tampa Bay defense, which we know is fantastic against the run, I think Kansas City does challenge them in the running game a little bit because of the way that they spread the field horizontally. The best offense in the league in terms of using sideline to sideline to spread a defense out. And when you spread a defense out, that does open up running lanes across the middle. So would it surprise me if we saw a rushing touchdown in this game? No, not at all. And I do think Darrell Williams is the more likely guy to hammer it in. We are monitoring 3 different injury situations this week. We're talking about Sammy Watkins, Antonio Brown, and then also Cameron Brate on the Tampa Bay side. But, who we're not talking about here is Patrick Mahomes. That toe is back to close to 100%, I think. So we may see him used on the ground again. However, they don't want a flare up again of this concussion thing, or I guess it wasn't technically a concussion. Mahomes was placed in the concussion protocol, did not miss a game there. But you have to think, would Andy Reid even risk putting Patrick Mahomes in harm's way? It is the Super Bowl. There is no tomorrow. I think all the options are on the table for Kansas City. So I say that all basically to say there is a way for rushing success to happen against this Tampa Bay defense, especially as it comes close to the end zone. So, we're talking about ways to get unique. Not many people are going to be interested in those running backs. That can be a tool in your toolkit. But I think primarily we are focusing on the passing game there for Kansas City. The 3 highest price players on the slate are from the Chiefs offense in the passing game: Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill. And obviously the last time these two teams played each other, Tyreek Hill put up his monster performance of the year, over 200 yards, 3 touchdowns, just obliterated this Bucs defense. And you have to think, heading into this game, Tampa's got to be saying not again, right? That was probably their MO at halftime in that game, was saying, this guy's been killing us, let's try to buckle him down. The question is, can they? Andy Reid is fantastic about creating unique matchups for his guys, getting his guys out in space, scheming them open. And I think that's what you'll see with Tyreek Hill. It would not surprise me if he lined up in the backfield for a few plays, got some running back touches, for example. we see Tyreek Hill used all over the place. Now, what I think is interesting is when Sammy Watkins comes back into the consideration. The pricing is interesting because you have the really high-priced Chiefs and the really low-priced Chiefs and a couple low-priced Buccaneers as well that are viable here on this slate. You're going to be really tempted to build a stars and scrubs approach, but you could also start mixing in some mid-price guys, some guys that are in that $4,000 to $6,000 range that can help you fill out your roster. That might make you a little bit unique as well, because I know I'm tempted to just plug in Mahomes, Hill, Kelsey, and let's just figure out the rest from there, right? Let's find three, cheaper guys that can just make it all work. However, thinking about what does Sammy Watkins do to this offense now that he's back? There were some interesting route changes last week in this Kansas City offense. Byron Pringle actually ran 31 routes last week. He was the wide receiver too for the Chiefs offense. He had leapfrogged ahead of Mecole Hardman, ahead of Demarcus Robinson. And Demarcus Robinson's now off the COVID list. We don't have to worry about that. So essentially we'll get what we expect to be a relatively healthy Chiefs passing game here. So what does that look like? Obviously we know Tyreek Hill's the number one wide receiver. We assume Sammy Watkins is the number two. But who factors in to be sort of that wide receiver 3 bargain guy? Is it going to be Mecole Hardman or is it going to be Demarcus Robinson? Well, we've seen Demarcus Robinson have consistent snaps over the course of the season. Mecole Hardman, on the other hand, been really hit or miss. His usage has been directly tied to whether Sammy Watkins is in the lineup or not. I think Sammy actually really hurts Hardman here in this situation. Robinson has a much more reliable usage. However, even though he's out there running routes, he has one of the worst targets per route rates in the NFL. And the dude leads the league in wind sprints out there at the wide receiver position. So he is one of my favorite guys when we're talking about cheap options. I would have said Byron Pringle would be the guy, but I think Pringle kind of goes back to being dust here in this offense. And it's kind of sad because I would love to play Pringle. And he's obviously coming off a game where he ran a lot of routes. However, I think Robinson's the guy that they'll count on here in a key situation. Now, obviously, you don't need me to tell you how good Travis Kelce is. You don't need me to tell you how good Tyreek Hill is. But figuring out what the rotation is going to look like behind Tyreek Hill could be a key to this game. Now, on the Tampa side, the running back situation is what we've got to figure out. Now, playoff Lenny has been a real thing. Leonard Fournette has been awesome this playoffs. However, we're talking about a slate where DraftKings is tempting us with a $2,200 Ronald Jones. Now, if they had done this in the middle of the season, we'd be jumping all over it. However, Ronald Jones has not played great recently. However, let me push back on that a little bit. Has Ronald Jones actually been bad recently? Has Leonard Fournette just been dusting Ronald Jones? Not so fast, my friend. Ronald Jones played pretty poorly last week. Just didn't get going. No running lanes for him. And obviously, he's a zero in the passing game. That's where Leonard Fournette's going to take over. However, let's just think back to 2 games ago against the Saints. When Tampa Bay is running the football, Ronald Jones looked like the much better running back in that game in terms of actually running the football, running between the tackles. He actually had a huge gain in that game that was called back. He'd probably ran for over 100 yards in that game if not for that penalty. He's got juice in the tank, and he actually looked better in terms of health-wise. I saw him look a little bit hobbled there in the Saints game, but then against the Packers, he looked fine. He just had nowhere to go, and that happens for running backs, especially small samples. When we're talking about a guy getting to, say, a dozen rush attempts, that may not be enough of a large sample, believe it or not, to figure out whether he is actually being effective or not. Sometimes the holes just aren't there. Now, against Kansas City, what will the holes look like? It remains to be seen. I think overall the Buccaneers are going to come out with a little bit more of a run-heavy approach, try to establish the run early, shorten this game, because I think if they go blow for blow with Kansas City, that's going to favor the Chiefs. You don't want to essentially invite Patrick Mahomes to go full throttle against you. So they want to keep this game slow. They want to inject variance in this game if they want a chance to win. So overall, I do expect them to use the ground game. So can you use Leonard Fournette? Can you use Ronald Jones? And Ronald Jones is going to be the bargain bin guy on the whole slate. Anybody with a pulse can be able to figure this out. However, What does it mean here in this Super Bowl slate? There's a little bit of new money coming in. People who haven't played Showdown all year are here checking it out. They don't know what they're doing. They're building bad lineups. Are they going to know who Ronald Jones is? Are they going to play him? Are they going to scroll all the way down to the bottom and see him there and click on him, especially after a couple bad games? No, maybe not. That might be the thing that keeps Ronald Jones' ownership down. Put this out on Twitter to see where everybody thought the Ronald Jones ownership might come in this game. And opinions are all over the board, from less than 20% to over 60%. And honestly, if you could tell me the answer to that question, I'd tell you whether or not I wanted to play Ronald Jones. However, that seems to be a really ambiguous thing right this second. So not knowing exactly where to go on Jones, and I do believe you could play Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette in the same lineup and not be dead. Matter of fact, I think that's a really interesting way to get unique. We've talked about that all year in terms of playing multiple running backs from the same team as a really interesting way to get unique. So without further ado, actually, before we hop into that, quick reminder, we need to get into the receivers, receiving options over for Tampa Bay. Let's talk about Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. We know what we've got there. Both those guys are going to project very similarly for targets, and we are thinking Antonio Brown is active this game. So if Antonio Brown's active, he's going to essentially assume those wide receiver 3 duties. However, I would expect his role to be a little bit limited based on his knee injury. This is his first game back. Has had a very up and down track record in practice this week. I could see Scotty Miller still being a thing, not as much as we saw last week, but Scotty Miller could still be involved in the game plan. Because you think about, if you're the Bucs and you're building this game plan, can you afford to assume Antonio Brown's playing this week? Of course not. You had to build in some Scotty Miller into the playbook this week. I don't believe Tyler Johnson's going to be a thing. I think Scotty Miller is sort of the direct replacement there for Antonio Brown. So you could certainly flirt with a little Scotty Miller in your lineups. That doesn't turn me off at all. I'd probably try to avoid Antonio Brown in my Scotty Miller lineups. And then we know what we have with Evans and Godwin, and so I think the receiving options are that tight. Now, Cameron Brate, on the other hand, tight end for the Buccaneers, does have a back injury. He's listed questionable. He looks like the actual most questionable guy here. However, Adam Schefter's reporting he should play, so we're expecting him to play. Now, we saw some interesting route developments there at the tight end position as well. Cameron Brate had actually been running pretty clearly ahead of Gronk for the second half of the season and then into the first part of the postseason. But last week, the tables turned. Gronk took back over the lead role, ran 23 routes compared to 12 for Cameron Brate. Now, if you're telling me we're going to get 23 Rob Gronkowski routes, sign me up for a $3,000 Rob Gronkowski for sure. Now, if you're looking at ways to get cheap and unique, you may be looking at $2,200 Ronald Jones or $3,000 Rob Gronkowski. And I would like to try to sell you on Rob Gronkowski, because if the guy's going to be out there running routes, and now Cameron Brate's a little bit banged up, we can feel a little more certain about that projection. We obviously have a Gronk Brady Super Bowl narrative in front of us as well. I think sometimes you can, if you don't have to tell yourself to take too many leaps forward, you can see how that sort of narrative pays off. I think chasing narratives can be a helpful thing as long as there's not too many assumptions to make along the way. But Gronk has an opportunity in front of him to be a big part of this game plan. And so I think he will be. I think he'll be utilized heavily. I think he'll be out there a lot, like almost every snap there for Gronk. And so I think he's one of the best value options here on the slate. Obviously, the kickers and defenses, let me just encourage you, 56 points is the total here. There's a lot of public money in on this game. Public tends to favor the over. Okay, so you could probably say that the over-under here on this game might actually be closer to, say, 53 or some other number that would still be a high number, but a little bit more close to a normal NFL game. But it's getting pumped up because of public volume. So let's just say that's the case. Well, if the game is projected to be at 53 points, we know there's a 50% chance it goes over, a 50% chance it goes under. What if this game ends up with a total somewhere in the 40s? Okay, well then the kickers might be a very big part of this game. There might not be a ton of touchdowns scored. There might be yardage that comes up short of actually converting in the end zone. So don't just write off kickers because we know this is supposed to be some high-scoring affair. Harrison Butker, Ryan Suckup can both be very, very useful here in this game. And the same with the defenses. We obviously know Patrick Mahomes is playing without starting left tackle Eric Fisher in this game. The Bucs pass D can get there. No doubt about it. And honestly, if Patrick Mahomes had a turnover, especially if he threw a turnover for a touchdown, a pick six, or a sack fumble touchdown that went towards the Bucs D, that actually really pushes Mahomes' volume up for the rest of the game from that point. Don't be afraid to play a quarterback against the opposing DST if you're going to use DST. I think that's actually the optimal way to do it, is by don't pick the quarterback with the DST, pick the quarterback against the DST. I think it's a helpful way to go. Let's look at the DraftKings captain spot allocations for the week, where it's Tyreek Hill who leads the way, followed by Travis Kelce, then Pat Mahomes, then Chris Godwin, followed by Tom Brady. So, ultimately, I would encourage you to consider how many people are going to be building in what types of ways. Obviously, Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce are going to be super popular options at the captain spot, as they should be. However, I guarantee you Chris Godwin comes in under-owned as a captain assignment. Tom Brady may be a little over-owned because he's a quarterback. Just kind of discourage a little bit of quarterback usage at the captain. It's not that it can't be done. It's just that it's typically going to favor the pass catchers there for those teams. And Chris Godwin stands out as the guy. He's the most sure-handed guy. He's the guy with sort of the most projectable floor-ceiling combo. Mike Evans is going to have a little wider range of outcomes there. But, if you kind of focused mostly on the top two receiving options for each of these teams, you have a really interesting spot. I was actually surprised that Chris Godwin outperformed Mike Evans so substantially, especially given his higher price tag. And so after Hill, Kelce, Mahomes, Godwin, it's Brady, Fournette, Evans, Darrell Williams, Sammy Watkins, and Rojo. So, there are some interesting ways to essentially punt the captain spot. And, Rojo would sort of be that punt guy. And if he gets there, if he does score, then maybe he allows you the opportunity to play Hill, Kelce, Mahomes, and Brady perhaps in the same lineup. I think, maybe the biggest rationale to go that way, but you're really kind of limiting first place upside there. Now looking at the flex appearances, obviously the top two players are quarterbacks here in this game, Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady, followed by Ronald Jones. So Jones is just a really key part of how we're building lineups. $2,200. It just opens up so many options there. If we think he's going to be even a reasonable part of this game plan, it just makes so much sense. I don't know what the ownership's going to be. It looks like a lot of other people don't know what it's going to be either. But you could certainly consider playing him. In lineups where you're not playing Ronald Jones, I do encourage you to consider Rob Gronkowski around that similar price point. But after Rojo, it's Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, Demarcus Robinson. So there's the cheap guy that the projections like here. Demarcus Robinson's the cheap guy that you could consider instead of Ronald Jones. So after Demarcus Robinson, it's Leonard Fournette, Darrell Williams, Chris Godwin, Sammy Watkins, Harrison Butker, Mike Evans, Rob Gronkowski, and then a decent-sized little teardrop down to Antonio Brown, Ryan Suckup, Cam Brate, and Mecole Hardman. And so you'll hear that I did not say Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Still got to go down a couple more names to get to CEH. He's a guy that I just will probably not have a ton of at all here in this game. I do think Darrell Williams is the favorite to lead this team in touches. Let's look at the Fanduel MVP assignments here this week. So we're going to actually talk about Fanduel and Yahoo here on this program. It's Patrick Mahomes clearing away as the favorite MVP, but let's not consider it a done deal. You still have Tyreek Hill, Tom Brady, Travis Kelce right there in the general vicinity, followed by Chris Godwin, Darrell Williams, Leonard Fournette, Mike Evans. So I would advise you to consider ways to not play Patrick Mahomes. He's obviously the favorite, but the ownership at MVP for Patrick Mahomes is going to be crazy high. You're going to have a really tough time making a unique lineup with Patrick Mahomes as your MVP. Consider Tyreek Hill lineups. Consider Travis Kelce lineups. Consider Chris Godwin lineups, even if you have to. If you are going to play a Mahomes MVP lineup, consider a really strange one-off. And I should mention with Cameron Brate expected to play, if for some reason he does not, Tanner Hudson becomes a really interesting guy in all formats for us. He is the third string tight end. He would essentially get the Brate role behind Rob Gronkowski. Let's look at the flex here on Fanduel, where it's Mahomes and Brady clearly as our top two choices, followed by Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, Darrell Williams, Leonard Fournette, Chris Godwin, Sammy Watkins, Ronald Jones, Harrison Butker, Rob Gronkowski, Mike Evans. Then we have a little teardrop after that. So it's a pretty clear little stair step there. You want to try to make sure you get Mahomes in the lineup. However, consider ways to get unique on FanDuel. It's a very difficult thing to do. You'll end up creating some pretty bad lineups as a result. However, give yourself a chance to take down a big prize. I mean, nobody's going to be really happy when they take down a $1,500 first place prize on a prize pool that's supposed to be, six figures. So, or I guess actually seven figures there on FanDuel here this week. So, try to find a way to get unique. Give yourself an opportunity for a big prize. Let's talk about Yahoo. It's a really interesting format. They're actually launching single game DFS this week for the first time. And Tyreek Hill is the optimal superstar here. Yahoo Fantasy is essentially duplicating the Fanduel MVP format with their superstar assignment. So you get to basically build a 5-person roster, one of which is your superstar. Superstar earns 1.5 times the fantasy points and costs you no additional salary. You get a $200 budget over on Yahoo. That compares to a $60,000 budget over on FanDuel. So you can essentially just multiply all the prices by $300 to get a apples to apples comparison of how they compare from site to site. And what's interesting here is that Yahoo has priced up all the quarterbacks. So you have to really, really, really pay for quarterback in this slate. And so essentially what that does is makes you have to consider 0 quarterback lineups. Whereas quarterback has been sort of the go-to MVP spot for FanDuel, you may have no quarterbacks in your lineup at all over on Yahoo, which obviously helps a player like Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. It's half-point PPR, no bonuses. And so it does become more difficult for pass catchers to outscore their quarterbacks. So just keep in mind the strategy there is a little different because of the pricing variation at quarterback specifically. And there are defenses available in the Yahoo player pool, whereas kickers are available in the FanDuel player pool. So there are no kickers in Yahoo. There are no defenses in FanDuel. Now you'll notice there are no defenses showing up here on my superstar assignments by player. That's because I have not had a chance to actually insert the defensive scoring numbers into my simulation model for Yahoo specifically. So we'll have to just assume that those aren't a big part of the game plan here this week. This will hopefully give you enough information to be ahead of the field. You want to be considering essentially 0 quarterback lineups. That's what I think is going to be the key. Now, obviously, we'd love to have dozens of slates to be able to test this. We'll have one. We'll get the Super Bowl here. Yahoo's going to essentially refigure their format in the offseason and come back with single game DFS for us in 2021. So that's an exciting thing, and we'll try to make sure we cover that as well. But after Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, it is Patrick Mahomes, followed by Leonard Fournette, Chris Godwin, Tom Brady, Mike Evans, Darrell Williams, and then a big teardrop after that. Looking at the flex appearances there for Yahoo, it's Pat Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Leonard Fournette, Darrell Williams, Tyreek Hill, Chris Godwin, Tom Brady, Mike Evans. And so the numbers go on from there. It seems like it could be a really interesting contest. The fact that they have priced up the quarterbacks there as a unique wrinkle that really does kind of separate it from FanDuel. So overall, we have the information, guys. This has been a really intriguing slate. Got some unique contests I'm entering here this week. It's a really unique opportunity to play against a different type of player than you play against really the entire year. Very public slate. So overall, hopefully we'll get a sort of semi-unique result. Hopefully we'll be in the contention to take home a big prize when one of those sorts of things happens. That'll do it for this season. Again, guys, just want to say thank you so much. Make sure that you subscribe. We'll try to have some more content for you over the course of the offseason. We'll do some non-DFS type stuff. We'll look at best ball drafts. We'll look at season-long drafts, ADPs, and things like that. Try to get you guys ahead of the field. Do some research for you this offseason. Have a chance to dig deep and do some off-season DFS type research as well. Should be a lot of fun. So make sure you continue to subscribe throughout the offseason. I've certainly enjoyed it, and please be sure you give us the thumbs up as well. Thanks again, guys. Good luck this Super Bowl. Hope you win a lot of money. See ya.